San Francisco's human trafficking and prostitution problems.
Francisco neighborhoods say that their community has now been overrun by prostitutes. They're blaming a California law that was passed last year in July. It decriminalizes loitering for prostitution purposes. Supporters of the law say it seeks to protect transgender people from discrimination, but its critics say they don't see how transgender equality has anything to do with prostitution. Joining me now is Michael Schellenberger, founder and president of Environmental Progress, author of Apocalypse Never and San Francisco, Why Progressives Ruin Cities. He's also a former California gubernatorial candidate. Michael, let's start here with what parents are reporting. They say, in some instances, that prostitutes are now soliciting business directly outside of public and private schools. Take a look at this. This is from a statement from one parent, Rosa Vargas. She says, "It's every day. During all periods of the day. Just last week, they were blocking the entrance of the parking structure where students were having basketball games." Does this shock you to hear?
Well, it is a shocking report, and I think what's interesting about it is that we saw a significant increase in street prostitution or street walking right after Governor Gavin Newsom signed the legislation in June of last year. So we saw a change even before the law went into effect on January 1st of this year. So we're seeing working class family neighborhoods in places like Oakland, mostly Latino neighborhoods with a huge influx of street walking. My colleague and I last Friday wrote a long report about a 14-year-old girl that's being sex trafficked by the MS-13 gang in San Francisco. The San Francisco police were actually called to rescue the girl, and they failed to arrive, both from a combination of staffing shortages and, I would say, misplaced priorities. The assistant police chief of San Francisco reassured us that they would be working to intervene in this case, but we're seeing a 2- to 3-fold increase in street prostitution and sex trafficking since that law was passed. You know, the policymakers in Sacramento were sold a bill of goods. They were told that somehow this would help to advance trans and black rights. That's absurd. The people that are being the most victimized are African Americans, disproportionately represented in those communities, and also trans kids or LGBT kids, kids that are working through their sexuality are more likely to be victimized. So this is a really terrible policy that needs to be reversed as soon as possible.
Take a look at this from City Journal. I want to talk to you about that legislation you just mentioned. The culprit, according to these critics, is Senate Bill 357. Here's what City Journal reports. Quote, "The anti-loitering statute had provided the grounds for officers to question women and children whom they suspected might be trapped in a prostitution ring. Without the statute, police hands were suddenly tied. Henceforth, questioning the girls and potentially provoking a violent confrontation with pimps came to seem a pyrrhic gamble, one that California's police officers would now avoid." You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is what's going on. Basically, they got in their minds in Sacramento, the radical left, which passed this, that the police are the bad guys, that the police, the people that are trying to protect young women who are often being addicted to hard drugs in order to become sex slaves for these violent gangs, they got in their minds that the police were the bad guys. The police are essential to rescuing these girls. So they've restricted what police are able to do. Literally just being able to talk to these women could get these police officers in trouble. So, you know, the police need to do a better job. We documented how they failed to act to protect this 14-year-old girl who is an orphan and in real distress, controlled, probably addicted to hard drugs and by this gang. But the whole idea here is that somehow police are the problem. It's a really twisted, demented way of viewing the world, and the biggest victims, of course, are the most vulnerable among us.